For most civilizations in the galaxy, the arrival of the Dominion was the end of the story. Their fleets did not negotiate. They did not bargain. They arrived, announced their authority, and the war was already over. Entire star systems had surrendered the moment Dominion ships appeared in orbit, which was why the High War Council found the planet Earth so puzzling. For 2 centuries, the Dominion had monitored the strange little blue world on the edge of an unremarkable spiral arm. Humans had invented radio, nuclear weapons, and primitive space travel in an unusually short span of time. But technologically, they were still behind the rest of the galaxy, centuries behind, which meant conquering them should have been easy. The Dominion strategists calculated the outcome with cold precision. Estimated resistance time, 42 minutes. Estimated surrender probability, 97%. Estimated casualties, minimal. It was, by every metric, a routine invasion. So when the Dominion's strongest expeditionary army entered the solar system, no one expected surprises. Thousands of black warships slipped out of hyperspace beyond Mars, forming an immense wall of steel and plasma engines. Their hulls shimmered with adaptive armor. Their weapon batteries could erase cities. Inside the ships waited the Dominion's most feared ground forces, towering soldiers wearing exoskeletal battlesuits, biologically engineered war beasts bred for combat, heavy walkers capable of tearing apart armored vehicles. Across the fleet, commanders prepared for the standard opening protocol, a broadcast. The flagship transmitted a message toward Earth on every known frequency. This world is now under Dominion authority. All military resistance will be considered hostile action. The message continued for several minutes, listing terms of surrender and instructions for planetary compliance. When it ended, the Dominion fleet waited. Normally, this was the moment when panic spread across a planet. Communications networks collapsed. Governments begged for negotiation. Military forces scrambled in hopeless defense. But Earth's response was strange. At first, there was silence. Then human satellites began adjusting their orbits. Military radars activated across the planet. The Dominion expected missile launches. None came. Instead, something unexpected began appearing across human information networks. Scientific discussions. Within hours, several universities had already begun analyzing Dominion transmissions and scanning data. Human astronomers quickly determined the approximate size and composition of the alien ships. Military analysts began studying the movement patterns of Dominion craft. But the strangest conversations were happening somewhere else entirely. Research laboratories, biology departments, food science institutes. Because among the data transmitted during the Dominion broadcast were biological scans of their soldiers and war beasts. Information normally included to demonstrate overwhelming superiority. The Dominion believed showing the power of their genetically perfected army would intimidate primitive worlds. It had worked hundreds of times, but humans reacted differently. At a research facility in Northern Europe, a group of biologists stared at the first translated reports. Dr. Marcus Hale leaned over the screen, adjusting his glasses. "Are these scans accurate?" he asked. A technician nodded. Multiple satellites confirmed them. Marcus studied the alien anatomy displayed on the monitor. The war beasts were massive creatures protected by thick outer plating, segmented exoskeleton, jointed limbs, internal muscle structure surprisingly dense. Across the room, another researcher raised an eyebrow. "Is it just me?" she said slowly. "Or does this look familiar?" Marcus didn't answer immediately. Instead, he opened another file, an Earth database. Marine biology. He pulled up an image. Lobster anatomy. The room went quiet. Someone coughed. Another scientist leaned closer to the screen. "Well," he said cautiously, "the structural similarities are notable." A food science researcher who had wandered in out of curiosity crossed his arms. "Hypothetically speaking," he said, "if the shell composition is similar—" He paused. "It might behave the same way under heat." Marcus blinked. "Wait!" Another scientist laughed nervously. No, we're not actually suggesting." But the room had already fallen into thoughtful silence. On another continent, a similar discussion was happening in a military research lab, and on social media, the idea was spreading much faster. Humans were posting side-by-side comparisons. Alien war beast anatomy. Crustaceans from Earth's oceans. Someone uploaded a diagram labeling possible edible sections. Another user posted a joke. Step 1. Capture alien monster. Step 2. Giant pot. Step 3. Butter. Within hours, the post had millions of views. Meanwhile, far above Earth, Dominion commanders watched the planet carefully. Their sensors detected military movement, aircraft repositioning, naval fleets leaving harbor. Everything appeared normal, except for one detail. Human communication networks were unusually calm. No mass panic, no desperate evacuation, and a surprising amount of laughter. Dominion General Carr stood inside the flagship command chamber, studying the incoming intelligence. "This is incorrect," he said slowly. His tactical officer looked up. "Sir," the psychological profile predicted widespread fear. The officer hesitated. "Well, humans do appear to be discussing our biological structure." Karth nodded. "That is expected. Primitive curiosity." The officer cleared his throat. "There is another topic appearing frequently in their transmissions." Karth turned. "What topic?" The officer hesitated before answering. "Nutritional composition." The command chamber went silent. Karth narrowed his eyes. "Explain." The officer looked down at the translated message on his screen, then read it aloud. "Human scientist requests confirmation whether Dominion war beast tissue contains toxins." Karth frowned. Why would that matter? The officer scrolled further, then slowly read the next line. "Follow a question. If not toxic, would be safe to cook?" The Dominion invasion began exactly 12 hours after surrender broadcast. That was the standard waiting period given to developing civilizations. Long enough for fear to spread. Long enough for governments to understand the situation. Normally, by the time the Dominion army landed, resistance had already collapsed. But Earth was not behaving normally. Across the planet, human militaries had mobilized quickly and efficiently. Aircraft patrolled the skies. Naval fleets moved into defensive formations. Satellites tracked every Dominion ship in orbit, yet the expected panic still hadn't appeared. Dominion analysts found this deeply unsettling. Inside the flagship command chamber, General Karth watched the tactical display, showing Earth below. "Begin ground deployment," he ordered. Immediately, thousands of armored drop pods launched from the fleet. They streaked through Earth's atmosphere like meteors, descending toward strategic locations across several continents. Each pod carried Dominion elite soldiers, warriors engineered for conquest. Their armor was layered with energy shielding. Their weapons could cut through steel. Their physical strength alone surpassed most species in the galaxy. Following the first wave came something even more intimidating: the war beasts, massive creatures bred specifically for planetary invasions. Their bodies were protected by thick segmented shells. Their claws could rip apart armored vehicles. Entire civilizations had surrendered the moment they saw these creatures deployed. But on Earth, the Dominion sensors detected something unexpected. Human forces were already waiting, not in chaotic defensive clusters. In organized formations, air units circled high above. Ground vehicles were positioned behind cover. Infantry squads moved calmly through prepared positions. Human commanders had clearly been planning something. General Karth leaned forward slightly. "Expected resistance level?" His tactical officer glanced at the projections. "Minimal threat to Dominion forces." Karth nodded. "Then proceed." The first battle began in the desert outside a major human city. Dominion drop pods slammed into the ground, their outer shells splitting open as armored soldiers stepped out on the Earth's surface. Behind them, several war beasts emerged from larger transport pods. The creatures let out deep, echoing roars as they unfolded their massive limbs. For a moment, the battlefield fell silent. Then the human response began. Helicopters appeared over the horizon, fast, low, instead of heavy bombardment. They deployed something unusual: long metal cables. The cables shot outward, wrapping around the legs of one of the war beasts. The creature roared in surprise as the cables tightened. At the same moment, Several armored vehicles rolled forward and fired electromagnetic pulse rounds. Blue energy flashes exploded around the beast. Its movement slowed. Its massive body staggered. Within seconds, the enormous creature collapsed to the ground. Dominion soldiers rushed forward to assist it, but human infantry had already surrounded the area. Strangely, they weren't firing lethal weapons. Instead, they used stun rounds, containment nets, high-powered taser devices. Within minutes, the war beast had been completely immobilized. Then something happened that Dominion commanders could not understand. Human forces began carefully securing the creature. They reinforced the cables. Lift drones arrived overhead. Instead of destroying the war beast, they started lifting it. Back aboard the Dominion flagship, General Carr stared at the tactical display. "Why are they transporting it?" he asked. His intelligence officer hesitated. "We are still analyzing the situation." On Earth, the captured war beast was transported to a military research facility. Inside a massive containment hangar, scientists gathered around the restrained creature. The beast was still alive, though heavily sedated. Dr. Marcus Hale stepped closer, examining the creature's outer shell. Up close, the similarities were even more obvious. Segmented armor plates, jointed legs, internal structure visible through scanning equipment. He slowly turned toward the rest of the research team. "Run the tissue analysis again." The results came back quickly. Protein density, extremely high. Fat composition, similar to several Earth marine species. Toxic compounds, none detected. The room fell quiet. One of the biologists looked at the report, then at the creature. "That can't be right." Marcus rubbed his chin. "Well, scientifically speaking, the results are clear." Across the room, the food science specialist from the previous meeting stepped forward. He stared at the data for several seconds. Then he sighed. "I mean, technically." Everyone looked at him. "It probably would cook very well." Someone laughed nervously. Another scientist shook his head. "This is ridiculous." But Marcus wasn't laughing. He was still staring at the scan results. Finally, he said quietly, "Send the report to command." Meanwhile, the battle outside the city continued. Dominion soldiers fought with precision and strength. But human tactics were becoming increasingly unusual. Instead of targeting war beasts for destruction, human forces focused on disabling them. Heavy tranquilizer rounds, electromagnetic traps, reinforced containment cages. Within hours, several more war beasts had been captured alive. Dominion commanders began noticing a disturbing pattern. Human soldiers seemed to be actively trying to avoid damaging the creatures. In one intercepted battlefield transmission, a human squad leader shouted, "Careful, don't crack the shell." Back aboard the flagship, the Dominion command staff listened to the translation in stunned silence. General Carr slowly turned to his intelligence officer. "Why would the shell matter?" The officer hesitated. "We are still reviewing the intercepted communications." Carth narrowed his eyes. "Explain." The officer looked down at the translation log, then reluctantly read the next line. "Human research request. Additional samples recommended." He paused, then finished the message, preferably intact. 3 days into the invasion, the Dominion command structure was no longer confident. Something about Earth was wrong. General Carr stood inside the flagship command chamber, watching the tactical display of the planet slowly rotating beneath them. According to the original projections, Earth should have surrendered within the first hour. Instead, the invasion had stalled, not because human forces were overwhelmingly powerful, but because they were behaving in ways the Dominion had never encountered before. The problem was not the fighting. The Dominion soldiers were still superior in strength and equipment. The problem was how humans chose to fight. They were not trying to destroy the Dominion army. They were trying to capture it. Entire Dominion assault groups had reported strange battlefield tactics. Human units used traps instead of explosives, electromagnetic pulses instead of heavy weapons, containment cages instead of artillery strikes. Dominion war beasts, normally the most feared creatures in any invasion, were being taken alive and transported away. At first, Dominion commanders assumed the humans want to study them. Primitive worlds often tried to reverse engineer alien technology or biology, but then Dominion intelligence intercepted something disturbing: a series of human internal transmissions. General Karth turned as the intelligence officer approached. "We have translated additional communications from human networks." Karth nodded. "Report." The officer hesitated. "There's a recurring topic appearing in their scientific discussions." "What topic?" The officer glanced down at the translation tablet. "Food preparation." The room went silent. Karth stared at him. "Explain." The officer cleared his throat and read from the intercepted message. "Human research group confirms captured war beast tissue contains high protein density." Another line followed. "Flavor profile comparison suggests similarity to several marine species." Karth's eyes narrowed. "What does that mean?" The officer hesitated again. "It means they are discussing whether our war beasts are edible." No one in the command chamber spoke for several seconds. Finally, one of the tactical officers laughed awkwardly. "That must be a mistranslation." The intelligence officer shook his head. "We confirmed the translation through 3 independent systems." Another message appeared on the screen. A video clip intercepted from a human laboratory. Scientists stood around a large containment tank where one of the captured war beasts was being examined. A researcher pointed at the creature's shell structure. "It's almost identical to a lobster exoskeleton," he said. Another scientist nodded thoughtfully. "That means it should respond to heat in a similar way." Someone off camera asked a question. "What about toxins?" The first researcher checked a screen. No toxic compounds detected. The room became very quiet. Then a third voice spoke. "So, technically it could be cooked." The video ended. Inside the Dominion command chamber, the silence returned. General Karth slowly folded his arms. "This is psychological warfare." One of the analysts looked uncertain. "Sir, it doesn't appear to be." Karth turned sharply. "What do you mean?" The analyst tapped the display. "These conversations are not public broadcasts. They are internal research discussions." Another officer added, "Human civilian networks are also discussing the topic." Karth frowned. "Show me." Within seconds, thousands of human messages filled the screen. Many of them appeared to be jokes. Images comparing war beasts to giant shellfish. Cooking diagrams. Speculation about flavor. One message read, "If the shell cracks like crab, we're going to need a much bigger pot." Another message showed a human chef standing next to a diagram of the alien creature. Caption: Step 1, capture. Step 2, boil. Step 3, add butter. The Dominion officers stared in disbelief. For centuries, their army had terrified entire civilizations. Worlds surrendered simply by seeing Dominion war beasts on the battlefield. Yet humans were discussing them like a seafood recipe. General Karth clenched his jaw. This is impossible. But the reports from the battlefield were becoming even worse. Dominion soldiers were beginning to notice strange behavior during combat. Human troops were shouting unusual instructions. "Don't damage the shell. Careful with the legs. Command wants this one intact." Dominion units that attempted to retreat found themselves chased by containment vehicles rather than attack drones. Some soldiers had even reported hearing humans celebrate after capturing a war beast, as if they had achieved some kind of prize. Dominion morale began to fracture, not because the humans were stronger, but because they were not behaving like a species under invasion. They were behaving like explorers studying a new discovery, or farmers gathering resources. Back aboard the flagship, another report arrived, this one from Dominion battlefield surveillance. The recording showed a group of human soldiers surrounding a disabled war beast. Instead of destroying it, they carefully secured it with reinforced cables. One of the soldiers looked at the creature thoughtfully. Then he turned to his squad and said something. The Dominion translation system processed the words. "Think this one would taste better grilled?" The soldiers laughed. The recording ended. Inside the command chamber, the Dominion officers finally understood something deeply disturbing. Humanity was not afraid. They were curious. And curiosity could be far more dangerous than fear, because a species that viewed an invading army as a new opportunity was a species the Dominion had never planned for. By the end of the second week, the war for Earth had become the most watched conflict in modern galactic history, not because of the scale of the fighting, but because of the confusion surrounding it. Across hundreds of star systems, governments and military observers tuned into Dominion tactical broadcasts. The Dominion had always been confident enough to show their power during invasions. Many civilizations used these recordings as warnings to others. Normally, the footage was simple. Dominion ships arrived. Resistance collapsed. Planet surrendered. But Earth was not following the script. The first analysts believed the situation was temporary. Perhaps humans had found a clever early defense. Perhaps Dominion commanders had underestimated them. But as the days passed, the reports became stranger. Dominion war beasts, once the unstoppable symbol of Dominion power, were disappearing from the battlefield, not destroyed, captured. Entire convoys of human transport vehicles were now moving across the planet, carrying secured alien creatures. Some were taken to research facilities. Others were transported to military testing grounds. The Dominion command structure was becoming increasingly frustrated. General Carr stood over the main tactical display, watching new reports arrive every hour. "How many units have we lost?" he asked. His intelligence officer answered carefully. 23 war beasts captured, sir." Karth narrowed his eyes. "Captured?" "Yes, sir. That number should be 0. The officer nodded. Human forces appeared to be using specialized equipment designed to immobilize them. Another officer stepped forward. "We have identified several new human devices that did not exist before the invasion began." Karth turned slowly. "Explain." The officer activated projection. Images appeared of strange human vehicles deployed on the battlefield. Large mechanical cages reinforced with thick steel bars. Heavy drones carrying containment nets. Armored trucks equipped with electromagnetic pulse cannons. "These machines appear specifically designed for non-lethal capture," the officer said. Karth stared at the projection. "They built this during the invasion?" "Yes, sir." Karth's expression hardened. "That is impossible. Complex systems require months of development." The officer hesitated. "Humans appear to have moved from concept to battlefield deployment in less than 5 days." The room fell silent. Around the galaxy, the situation was being studied by dozens of alien civilizations. Many had fought the Dominion before. Most had lost. But the footage coming from Earth was unlike anything they had ever seen. Human forces had begun deploying what their military called capture divisions. These specialized units focus entirely on trapping Dominion war beasts without damaging them. Footage from one battlefield showed several war beasts charging toward a human defensive line. Normally, this attack would shatter most armies. But the humans had prepared something unexpected. The ground suddenly collapsed beneath the charging creatures. Massive reinforced pits had been constructed beneath the battlefield. The war beasts tumbled into the traps. Within minutes, drones dropped containment grids over the openings. The creatures were secured, then lifted out by heavy transport aircraft. Across the galaxy, analysts replayed the footage repeatedly. One alien military expert summarized the situation in a widely shared report. "The humans are not attempting to defeat the Dominion army through traditional warfare. They are studying it." Back on Earth, the scientific community had become deeply involved in the conflict. Captured war beasts were now being examined in laboratories across several countries. Biologists mapped their internal systems. Engineers studied their armor structures. Food scientists, somewhat reluctantly, continued analyzing their biological composition. Dr. Marcus Hale stood in one of the research facilities, watching a group of technicians perform another tissue scan. The results appeared on the screen. The data had not changed. High protein density. No toxic compounds. Extremely durable outer shell. A chef who had been invited to the lab for consultation stared at the results thoughtfully. "Well," he said quietly, "from a purely academic perspective," Marcus sighed. "Please don't say it." The chef shrugged. "I'm just saying the cooking potential is impressive." Meanwhile, the Dominion army continued attempting to regain control of the battlefield. But human tactics were evolving faster than expected. Each captured war beast gave the humans more information. Weak points in the shell, reaction patterns, mobility limitations. Human forces adapted quickly. Soon Dominion commanders noticed something deeply unsettling. Humans were beginning to predict the behavior of their war beasts. Ambushes appeared exactly where the creatures would move. Traps were positioned along likely attack routes. Within days, Dominion war beasts were no longer feared. They were expected. Across Dominion command channels, reports began mentioning something even worse. Human soldiers were now openly joking during combat. One intercepted transmission included a human squad leader speaking over the radio. "Command says we need 2 more intact." A soldier replied, "What about the big one?" The squad leader paused. "That one's going to require a bigger truck." The soldiers laughed. Back aboard the Dominion flagship, General Karth listened to the translation in disbelief. "This cannot continue," he said quietly, because for the first time in Dominion history, their army was not terrifying a planet. It was becoming the subject of human curiosity. And curiosity, Karth realized, might be something far more difficult to defeat. By the 3rd week of the invasion, the Dominion High Command faced a reality none of their simulations had predicted. The Earth campaign was no longer progressing. It was unraveling, not because Dominion forces had been destroyed. Their ships still dominated Earth's orbit. Their soldiers still held technological superiority in many areas. But the psychological balance of conflict had shifted completely. Dominion soldiers were beginning to hesitate on the battlefield. For centuries, they had been the most feared army in the galaxy. Entire civilizations surrendered simply to avoid facing them. But on Earth, something deeply unsettling had happened. Humans were not afraid. They were curious. And curiosity had transformed the entire war. Inside the Dominion flagship, General Karth watched the newest battlefield report scroll across the central display. Another war beast captured. Another containment convoy leaving the battlefield. Another human research team requesting additional specimens. Karth turned to his intelligence officer. "How many have they taken now?" The officer answered carefully. 38 confirmed war beasts, sir." Karth closed his eyes briefly. That number alone would have broken the military power of several civilizations. Yet the humans still seemed unsatisfied. Another message appeared on the screen. Human military command requesting transport clearance for a newly captured creature. Attached to the report was a note from the research division. Specimen intact. Shell structure undamaged. Karth exhaled slowly. For the first time in his career, the Dominion invasion protocol had reached a situation with no established response. They had prepared for resistance. They had prepared for surrender. They had even prepared for planetary destruction. But they had never prepared for this. A species that treated an invading army like an unexpected discovery. Karth finally spoke. "Open a diplomatic channel." Several officers looked up in surprise. "Sir, transmit directly to Earth's planetary command." Moments later, a signal was sent through the Dominion fleet. Across the planet, the message appeared on military and government communication networks. Within minutes, a human representative appeared on the Dominion command screen. The human sat calmly behind a desk. No armor, no visible weapons, just a quiet expression and a small communication console. Karth studied him carefully. "This is General Karth of the Dominion Expeditionary Command." The human nodded politely. "I'm Ambassador Daniel Wright." Karth wasted no time. "We have reviewed the behavior of your species during this conflict." Daniel folded his hands. "And..." Karth's voice remained steady. "Our forces were deployed to establish Dominion authority over this world. But your actions suggest a different interpretation of the situation." Daniel smiled faintly. "You mean the research?" Karth stared at him. "Yes." There was a pause. Then Karth asked a question that had been spreading through the Dominion command structure for days. "Why are your forces capturing our war beasts instead of destroying them?" Daniel leaned back slightly in his chair. "General, humans evolved on a very difficult planet." Karth said nothing. Daniel continued calmly. "On Earth, survival often depended on turning problems into resources. Dangerous animals became tools. Hostile environments became opportunities." Karth frowned. "You are comparing an invading army to natural wildlife." Daniel shrugged lightly. "From a certain perspective, the The comparison works. The Dominion officers watching the transmission exchanged uneasy looks. Daniel continued speaking in the same relaxed tone. When your forces arrived, our scientists started studying the data you transmitted. They noticed some interesting biological similarities. Carth's eyes narrowed. Similarities? Daniel nodded. Yes. He paused briefly. Your war beasts share structural traits with several species on our planet. Carth already knew where this was going, but he asked anyway. And that led to your curiosity. Daniel smiled slightly. Well, scientists are naturally curious. Another pause followed. Then Daniel added something that echoed across the Dominion command chamber. And, to be fair, someone eventually asked a question. Carth's voice became very quiet. What question? Daniel leaned forward just a little. The same question that had spread across human networks since the first battle. Could we eat it? The Dominion command chamber fell silent, not because the idea was shocking, but because the answer had already changed the course of the invasion. Daniel continued calmly. Once our scientists confirmed the biology was safe, the situation became interesting. Carth rubbed his temple. You are telling me that your war strategy was influenced by culinary curiosity. Daniel thought for a moment. Not entirely. Humanity also enjoys solving unusual problems. Carth stared at the human ambassador for several seconds. Then he gave the only order that still made sense. All Dominion ground forces will begin immediate withdrawal. Around him, several officers looked stunned, but none argued, because the truth had become obvious. A species that looked at an invading army and asked what else it could become was not a species the Dominion wanted to fight. Across the galaxy, observers recorded the moment the Dominion fleet turned away from Earth. No final battle, no dramatic victory, just a quiet retreat. And in the archives of several civilizations, a new warning was added beside the entry for humanity. If you plan to invade Earth, be very careful what you bring with you, because humans have a habit of seeing possibilities where others only see enemies.